For 64 days, a man lay entombed inside a frozen car buried beneath snow in the forests of northern Sweden, eating nothing, drinking only melted snow, as temperatures outside dropped to minus 30 degrees Celsius. When rescuers finally pulled him from the vehicle in February 2012, medical experts could not explain how he was still alive. His core body temperature had fallen dangerously low. He could barely speak. His body had consumed its own muscle tissue to survive. Yet his heart still beat. This is not a story of heroic adventure or calculated survival strategy. It is a story of what happens when isolation, cold, and desperation converge, and a human being is forced to endure conditions that science insists should be fatal. The man's name was Peter Skyllberg. He was 44 years old at the time of his discovery, though rescuers initially believed they had found a corpse. He was not an outdoorsman testing his limits. He was not a survivalist prepared for wilderness emergencies. He was a man whose life had unraveled quietly, piece by piece, until one December day in 2011, his red Volvo sedan left the road in a remote area of Umeå, a city in Västerbotten County, approximately 600 kilometers north of Stockholm. What happened next would challenge everything medical science understood about human endurance in extreme cold. Northern Sweden in winter is a landscape designed to erase human presence. Daylight lasts only a few hours. Temperatures plunge well below freezing and remain there for months. Snow falls steadily, blanketing roads, forests, and anything stationary. The region is sparsely populated. Stretches of forest road can go days without a single passing vehicle. In such conditions, a car leaving the road is not necessarily unusual. What is unusual is for that car and its occupant to remain undiscovered for 2 months. Peter Skyllberg's Volvo had veered off a small forest road, coming to rest in a snowbank some distance from the pavement. It is unclear whether this was intentional or accidental. What is known is that the car quickly became buried. Snow accumulated on the roof, the hood, the windows. Within days, the vehicle was invisible from the road. The snow provided insulation, sealing the car from the outside world, but also sealing Peter inside. The engine could not run. There was no heat. The interior temperature would soon match the exterior cold, hovering just above freezing at best, well below freezing at worst. Inside the car, Peter had almost nothing. No food, no camping gear, no emergency supplies. He had the clothes he was wearing. He had the seats, the upholstery, the interior materials of the vehicle, and he had snow. In the first days, he may not have fully grasped the severity of his situation. Perhaps he believed he would be found quickly. Perhaps he thought he could dig himself out. But as the snow continued to fall and the cold settled in, the reality became inescapable. He was trapped. No one knew where he was. No one was looking for him. The human body requires energy to survive. That energy comes from food. Without food, the body begins to consume itself. First, it metabolizes stored fat. Then, when fat reserves are depleted, it begins breaking down muscle tissue, converting protein into glucose to fuel the brain and vital organs. This process is called catabolism. It is slow, agonizing, and ultimately fatal. The average human can survive approximately 3 weeks without food, though this varies depending on body composition, metabolic rate, and environmental conditions. Peter Skyllberg would go without food for more than 9 weeks. Water is more immediately critical. A human can survive only 3 to 4 days without water under normal conditions. In extreme cold, dehydration is less rapid because the body conserves moisture, but it remains a threat. Peter had one advantage. He was surrounded by snow. Snow is frozen water. If melted, it can be consumed. Peter used his body heat to melt snow, likely placing handfuls of it in his mouth or against his skin, letting it liquefy before swallowing. This was his only source of hydration. It was not ideal. Melting snow with body heat burns calories. Calories Peter did not have, but it kept him alive. The cold itself presented a paradox. In normal circumstances, extreme cold kills quickly. Hypothermia sets in when core body temperature drops below 35 degrees Celsius. At 32 degrees, the heart becomes dangerously unstable. At 28 degrees, most people lose consciousness. Death usually follows. Yet, Peter survived temperatures that should have killed him within hours. How? The answer lies in a phenomenon that scientists still do not fully understand, a state of suspended animation brought on by prolonged cold and starvation. When the body is starved and exposed to extreme cold, metabolism slows dramatically. The heart rate drops. Breathing becomes shallow. Cellular activity decreases. In this state, the body requires less oxygen, less energy. It enters a kind of hibernation, not entirely unlike what bears do in winter, though humans are not biologically designed for this. Peter's body, deprived of food and surrounded by cold, seems to have entered the state involuntarily. His core temperature dropped, but not low enough to stop his heart. His metabolism slowed, but not enough to shut down vital organs. He existed in a liminal space between life and death, his body performing a balancing act that modern medicine still struggles to explain. Days turned into weeks. Peter lay in the back seat of the Volvo, curled into a fetal position to conserve heat. He likely did not move much. Movement burns energy. Energy was the one resource he could not afford to waste. His muscles atrophied. His skin grew pale. His hair and nails continued to grow, one of the few biological processes that does not stop even in starvation. He lost an estimated 40 kilograms of body weight, nearly half of what he weighed when the ordeal began. His face became skeletal. His voice, when he could still speak, grew weak and raspy. The mind suffers differently than the body in isolation. While muscles waste and organs slow, the brain continues to function, often in ways that become detached from reality. Peter Skyllberg spent 2 months alone in near total darkness with no human contact, no conversation, no external stimulation beyond the muffled silence of snow pressing against metal. What that does to a person's sense of self is difficult to quantify, but psychological research on extreme isolation offers clues. In studies of solitary confinement and prolonged isolation, subjects frequently report time distortion. Hours feel like days. Days feel like hours. The rhythm of time, normally anchored by sunlight, social interaction, and routine activity, collapses. Without these markers, the brain struggles to construct a coherent timeline. Peter likely experienced this. He may not have known whether he had been in the car for 3 days or 3 weeks. The darkness inside the snow-buried vehicle would have been near absolute. In northern Sweden during December and January, even daylight is weak and brief, filtered through layers of snow and car windows. It would have provided almost no illumination. Sensory deprivation of this magnitude often leads to hallucinations. The brain, starved for input, begins generating its own. People in isolation report seeing shapes, hearing voices, feeling presences that are not there. These are not signs of madness, but neurological responses to extreme conditions. The brain is designed to process constant sensory information. When that information stops arriving, it invents it. Peter may have seen faces in the shadows of the car's interior. He may have heard sounds that were not real. He may have believed at times that he was somewhere else entirely. Hunger creates its own psychological effects. After the first few days without food, the acute pain of hunger subsides. The stomach stops growling. The body enters a state of ketosis, burning fat for energy, and the sensation of hunger dulls. But cognitive function begins to deteriorate. Thinking becomes slow and fragmented. Concentration weakens. Memory becomes unreliable. Decision-making ability declines. In Peter's case, trapped in a situation with no decisions to make and no actions to take, this mental fog may have been a kind of mercy. It meant less suffering, less awareness, less time spent confronting the hopelessness of his condition. But there were moments, surely, of clarity. Moments when Peter understood exactly where he was and what was happening to him. Moments when the reality of his situation broke through the numbness. Those moments would have been the hardest to endure. Not the cold, not the hunger, but the knowledge that he was dying slowly alone and that no one knew. That no one was coming. Did he try to escape? The evidence suggests he did, at least initially. When rescuers eventually found the car, the driver's side door was partially open, packed with snow. This indicates Peter had attempted to push it open at some point, perhaps in the early days before the snow became too deep and his strength too depleted. But the door would not have moved far. Snow is deceptively heavy. A meter of snow piled against a car door creates hundreds of kilograms of pressure. A well-fed, healthy person would struggle to force it open. A starving man with failing muscles would have no chance. The windows offered no better option. Car windows are designed not to shatter easily. Breaking one by hand requires force and leverage Peter did not possess. Even if he had managed to break a window, the opening would have filled immediately with snow. Digging out through snow is possible only if you have somewhere to displace the snow. Inside a buried car, there is nowhere for it to go. Peter was effectively entombed. So he stayed. Whether by choice or necessity is unknowable. He lay in the back seat, breathing shallowly, sipping melted snow, and waiting. For what? Rescue. Perhaps, though as days turned into weeks, that hope must have faded. Death, more likely. Or perhaps he was not waiting for anything at all. Perhaps he simply existed moment to moment, with no expectation of change. His body continued its slow collapse. Fat reserves were gone within the first 2 weeks. After that, the body began cannibalizing muscle tissue. The heart, which is a muscle, began to weaken. The diaphragm, which controls breathing, lost strength. Every breath required more effort. His immune system, deprived of nutrients, shut down almost entirely. A minor infection would have killed him quickly, but the cold ironically protected him. Bacteria and viruses do not thrive in freezing temperatures. The same cold that was killing him was also preventing opportunistic infections from finishing the job. His skin, stretched over shrinking muscle and bone, became paper-thin. Pressure sores likely developed where his body pressed against the car seat. These sores, caused by prolonged immobility, are painful and slow to heal under normal circumstances. In Peter's condition, they would not have healed at all. His hair, no longer supported by a healthy scalp, may have begun to thin. His teeth, lacking the calcium and phosphorus normally supplied by food, would have loosened slightly in their sockets. Yet his brain, remarkably, continued to function. The brain is the last organ the body sacrifices in starvation. It consumes approximately 20% of the body's energy even at rest, and the body would destroy muscle, bone, and organ tissue to keep the brain alive as long as possible. This is why people in the final stages of starvation often remain lucid almost until the end. Peter's thoughts, slow and fragmented though they may have been, persisted. What did he think about? There's no way to know. He did not keep a journal. He left no record of his internal experience. But people in similar situations often report thinking about the past. Memories become vivid in isolation. Childhood scenes replay with startling clarity. Conversations from years ago resurface. The mind, with no present worth attending to, retreats into memory. Peter may have relived better days. He may have thought about people he had known. He may have replayed decisions that led him to this frozen car on this forest road. Or perhaps he thought about very little. Starvation and cold both induce a kind of mental blankness, a shutting down of higher cognitive function to conserve energy. In this state, the mind does not wander or reflect. It simply waits, dimly aware, neither hoping nor despairing, suspended in a gray space between consciousness and unconsciousness. Time passed. Snow accumulated on the roof of the Volvo, layer upon layer, until the vehicle was buried under more than a meter of compacted snow. Outside, temperatures fluctuated between -15 and -30 degrees Celsius. Inside the car, the temperature hovered just below freezing. Peter's body heat, minimal though it was, prevented the interior from matching the exterior cold. This narrow margin, a few degrees of difference, kept his blood from freezing in his veins. On February 19th, 2012, a man was driving slowly along a forest road near Umal when he noticed something unusual. A faint shape beneath the snow, barely visible, the outline of something that did not belong. He stopped, approached on foot, brushed away some of the snow. It was a car, a red Volvo, almost completely buried. How long it had been there, he could not guess. Days, perhaps, maybe a week. He cleared more snow from the driver's side window and peered inside. What he saw made him recoil. A figure lay in the back seat, motionless, skeletal. The man's first thought was that he had found a body, a corpse, frozen solid, abandoned or forgotten. He called the police immediately. Within the hour, emergency responders arrived. They approached the vehicle cautiously, unsure what they would find. They cleared snow from the doors, pried open the driver's side door, which had been partially forced open from the inside at some point and then frozen shut. The smell that emerged was faint but unmistakable. Human waste, stale air, something organic and wrong. One of the responders leaned into the vehicle, shining a flashlight toward the back seat. The figure did not move. The responder called out. No response. He reached forward, touched the man's shoulder, and felt it give way beneath the fabric of the jacket. Barely any flesh. Mostly bone. Then the figure moved. Not much. A slight shift of the head. A shallow breath. The responder jerked back. Startled. The man was alive. The rescue that followed was delicate and urgent. Peter Skyllberg could not move on his own. His muscles had atrophied to the point of near uselessness. He could not stand. He could not walk. He could barely speak. His voice, we tried, came out as a rasp, barely audible. His eyes, sunken deep into his skull, open only slightly. The paramedics lifted him carefully from the car, wrapped him in thermal blankets, and placed him on a stretcher. He weighed approximately 45 kilograms. Before entering the car 2 months earlier, he had weighed close to 85 kilograms. They transported him immediately to University Hospital. In the ambulance, paramedics monitored his vital signs, expecting at any moment for his heart to stop. His core body temperature was measured at 31 degrees Celsius, dangerously low, well into the range of severe hypothermia. His heart rate was weak and irregular. His blood pressure was barely detectable. His breathing was shallow, only 6 or 7 breaths per minute. By every medical standard, he should not have been alive. At the hospital, doctors worked quickly. They began the slow, careful process of warming him. Warming a hypothermic patient too quickly can be fatal. Rapid rewarming causes blood vessels to dilate suddenly, dropping blood pressure and potentially triggering cardiac arrest. The process must be gradual, controlled. They use heated blankets, warm intravenous fluids, and heated oxygen delivered through a breathing tube. Slowly, over hours, Peter's core temperature began to rise. But temperature was only one problem. The greater challenge was his state of starvation. Blood tests revealed catastrophic malnutrition. His blood glucose was dangerously low. His electrolyte levels were severely imbalanced. His kidneys were on the verge of failure. His liver enzymes indicated significant damage. His hemoglobin was depleted, meaning his blood could barely carry oxygen. His body had consumed not only fat and muscle, but had begun breaking down internal organs to sustain critical functions. Refeeding a starving person is almost as dangerous as the starvation itself. When food is reintroduced after prolonged deprivation, the body's metabolic systems, which have shut down to conserve energy, suddenly restart. This causes a massive shift in electrolytes, particularly phosphorus, potassium, and magnesium. If not managed carefully, this shift can cause refeeding syndrome, a potentially fatal condition that can lead to heart failure, respiratory failure, seizures, and death. The medical team at UMOA understood this. They did not feed Peter immediately. Instead, they began with small amounts of glucose delivered intravenously. They monitored his electrolyte levels constantly, adjusting supplementation as needed. Only after several days did they introduce small amounts of liquid nutrition through a feeding tube. Peter's digestive system, dormant for 2 months, had to be reawakened slowly. His stomach had shrunk. His intestines had slowed almost to a halt. Too much food too quickly would overwhelm his system. Peter remained in intensive care for weeks. He could not speak coherently at first. His vocal cords, weakened by disuse, produced only faint sounds. His cognitive function was impaired. He seemed aware of his surroundings but could not form complex thoughts or answer detailed questions. Doctors were unsure whether this impairment was temporary or permanent. Prolonged starvation and hypothermia can cause brain damage. Neurons, deprived of oxygen and glucose, begin to die. Whether Peter's brain had suffered irreversible harm would not be clear for some time. As the days passed, he began to improve, slowly. His body temperature stabilized. His heart rhythm normalized. His kidneys began to function again. The refeeding process continued, cautiously, incrementally. By the third week, he was able to consume small amounts of solid food. By the fourth week, he could sit up in bed with assistance. His muscles, wasted nearly to nothing, began the long process of rebuilding. The medical staff treating him were baffled. They consulted specialists in hypothermia, in starvation, in survival medicine. No one could offer a satisfying explanation for how Peter had survived. The longest documented case of survival without food was 73 days, achieved by a hunger striker in a controlled environment with medical supervision and unlimited water. Peter had survived 64 days in freezing temperatures with no food and only snow for hydration. The conditions were incomparable. One theory centered on the cold itself. In extreme cold, the body's metabolic rate drops. This is a protective mechanism, an attempt to conserve energy. In Peter's case, the cold may have slowed his metabolism to such a degree that his body required far fewer calories to function. Essentially, he may have entered a state of semi-hibernation, a condition not normally possible in humans, but perhaps triggered by the combination of starvation, dehydration, and sub-zero temperatures. Another theory involved the snow. Snow, when melted, is pure water. Peter had consumed nothing but water for 2 months. While this provided no calories, it prevented the severe dehydration that would have killed him within days. Water alone cannot sustain life indefinitely, but it can prolong it. Combined with the metabolic slowdown induced by cold, the water may have stretched the survival window beyond what anyone thought possible. A third theory was psychological. Some researchers suggested that Peter's mental state, whether through depression, resignation, or some other factor, may have contributed to his survival. When the mind ceases to struggle, when it stops burning energy on anxiety, fear, and planning, the body requires less fuel. Peter, trapped with no possibility of escape, may have entered a state of profound mental stillness, a kind of surrender that paradoxically kept him alive. But these were only theories. No one could say with certainty why Peter Skyllberg survived when others in similar conditions had not. His case was published in medical journals, studied by researchers, and debated in conferences. It became a reference point for discussions about the limits of human endurance. And yet, for all the analysis, the central mystery remained. How does a human being live for 2 months without food in a frozen car? Peter Skyllberg remained hospitalized for nearly 2 months following his rescue. The process of recovery was slow, painful, and uncertain. His body had been pushed beyond recognizable limits, and bringing it back from that edge required meticulous medical care. Physical therapists worked with him daily, helping him relearn basic movements. Walking, once automatic, now required concentration and effort. His legs, stripped of muscle, could barely support his weight. He needed a walker at first, then a cane. Even standing upright caused dizziness and exhaustion. His digestive system, dormant for so long, struggled to process normal food. Doctors maintained a strict diet plan, gradually increasing portions and complexity. Rich foods caused nausea. His stomach cramped after even small meals. His body had forgotten how to process fats, proteins, and complex carbohydrates. These systems had to be retrained, coaxed back into function like a machine left idle for years. But the physical recovery, difficult as it was, proved easier than the psychological aftermath. Peter spoke little about his ordeal, even to doctors and therapists assigned to help him. When asked what he remembered, he gave vague, fragmented answers. He recalled being in the car. He recalled the cold. He recalled eating snow. Beyond that, his memories were unclear, possibly suppressed, possibly genuinely lost to the fog of starvation and hypothermia. What he did say suggested a profound detachment from the experience. He described lying in the back seat and feeling as though time had stopped. He said he did not remember being particularly afraid. He did not remember hoping for rescue. He said, in one interview given months later, that he had simply waited for what he could not or would not say. His tone was flat, emotionless, as though describing something that had happened to someone else. Psychiatrists who evaluated him noted signs of severe depression, likely predating the incident in the car. Peter's life before December 2011 had been marked by isolation and instability. He had no close family, few friends, no steady employment. He had drifted through temporary jobs and temporary living situations, disconnected from the social structures that anchor most people's lives. The circumstances that led him to that forest road remained unclear. He did not explain why he had been there or what he had been doing. Accident or intention, the line between the two seemed blurred even in his own mind. This raised uncomfortable questions that medical professionals and journalists struggled to address. Was Peter's survival an act of will, or an accident biology? Had he fought to stay alive, or had he simply failed to die? The distinction matters philosophically, but perhaps not practically. Survival, in the end, is survival. The body continues. The heart beats. Whether the mind wills it or merely tolerates it may be irrelevant. What cannot be disputed is the physical evidence of what his body endured. Medical imaging revealed extensive muscle loss, bone density reduction, and early signs of organ damage that would likely persist for the rest of his life. His kidneys, though functional, had been permanently weakened. His heart showed signs of strain that suggested long-term cardiovascular risk. His immune system, compromised during the ordeal, remained fragile. Infections that a healthy person would fight off easily could pose serious threats to Peter for years. By April 2012, approximately 2 months after his rescue, Peter was discharged from the hospital. He was mobile, capable of self-care, and medically stable, though far from fully recovered. Social services assisted in finding him housing. He was placed in a supported living facility where staff could monitor his health and provide assistance as needed. He did not return to the life he had lived before. That life, tenuous as it had been, no longer existed. The media attention surrounding his case was intense but brief. For a few weeks, Peter Skyllberg's story circulated through newspapers, television reports, and online articles. Medical experts were interviewed. Survival specialists offered commentary. Psychologists speculated about trauma and resilience. Then, as media attention always does, it moved on. Peter faded from public view. He gave no further interviews. He did not write a book or appear on talk shows. He retreated into the same quiet obscurity from which he had briefly emerged. But his case did not fade from medical literature. Research papers analyzing his survival appeared in journals focused on emergency medicine, hypothermia, and nutritional science. His case became a teaching example in medical schools, used to illustrate the extremes of human physiology. Students studying metabolism, starvation, and cold exposure learned about the man who survived 2 months in a frozen car. They debated the mechanisms that might explain his survival. They discussed the ethical implications of treating patients recovered from extreme self-neglect or ambiguous suicidal ideation. For the general public, Peter Skyllberg's story served a different function. It became a modern parable about isolation, endurance, and fragility of human life. It reminded people how quickly normalcy can collapse, how easily someone can slip through the cracks of society and disappear. It raised questions about mental health, social safety nets, and what responsibility society has toward those who drift to its margins. Yet the story resists simple moral framing. It is not inspirational in the conventional sense. Peter did not overcome adversity through determination or ingenuity. He did not fight his way out. He simply endured, passively, barely conscious, kept alive by biological processes he neither controlled nor understood. There is no lesson about perseverance here, no message about never giving up. There is only the blunt fact of survival against impossible odds. What remains, ultimately, is a question without a satisfying answer. Why did Peter Skyllberg survive when others in similar situations have not? Was it his body composition, his metabolic rate, the specific temperature range inside the car, the purity of the snow he consumed, some combination of all these factors, or something else entirely? Medical science offers hypotheses, but no certainties. His survival exists at the outer edge of what biology allows, in a space where our understanding breaks down. Perhaps that is the real lesson of Peter Skyllberg's story. Not that humans are capable of extraordinary resilience, though they are. Not that survival is always possible if one simply refuses to give up, because it is not. The lesson is that the human body, pushed to its absolute limits, sometimes does things we cannot fully explain. It crosses thresholds we thought were absolute. It survives when survival should be impossible. Peter Skyllberg ate nothing for 64 days. He drank only melted snow. He lay in sub-zero temperatures with no heat source, no movement, no help. And he lived. The mechanics of how remain partially unknown. The reasons why remain even more obscure. What is known, what cannot be denied, is that when rescuers pulled him from that frozen Volvo on a February afternoon in 2012, his heart was still beating. And in the end, that is the only fact that matters. Against all odds, against all expectations, against the limits of what medical science believed possible, he survived. Not because he was stronger, smarter, or more determined than others who had died in similar circumstances, but because, for reasons we may never fully understand, his body refused to stop. It endured. It persisted. It survived. If stories like this challenge you, unsettle you, or make you reconsider the limits of human endurance, consider supporting the channel. Like the video, subscribe, and join us for more true stories of survival, resilience, and the extraordinary, inexplicable capacities of a human body and mind.